You moved on in 1964 to the Brucefield Hotel, although it wasn't the end of the house by any amount of means. We'll come on to that later. But you moved to the Brucefield Hotel, a bigger venue, and of course people could get a refreshment as well. Would that lead to the popularity of the club there?
Oh yes, it led to the popularity of the club there, and there, of course, we were joined by other singers and performers who were the nucleus of the club. People like Chuck Ritchie from Inverkeithing, the fiddle player who was the town officer in Inverkeithing. I just went in to see him, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'll come up there." And then, of course, that was the first place in Dunfermline, the first place in Scotland that Barbara Dixon sung in, because she came to, I think it was the second night of the club, and got up and sung, and that was her as a resident in that club. And she started singing with Jackie Beck, and they were very successful together, Jack and Barbara.
You ran for approximately just over a year, and then moved on to the Rosyth Folk Song Club.
Right.
There was a split, but it was a musical split, John. Can you fill us in on why you would want to move from the Brucefield to the Rosyth Folk Song Club?
Well, it was a I stopped running the club, and there were other people running the club, and Barbara Dixon, myself, Jack Beck, Tony Harris, and by that time Tommy Bonner, we weren't all that happy with the musical direction that it was taking. There was no acrimony of any kind. We just decided that we had ideas about the music, and so we just moved en bloc to Rosyth Hotel for a year. And we had our ups and downs there. We only ran for a year, but it was a good going club, and we got lots of good singers, incredible string band, and Jimmy Macbeth and the McCalmans and all sorts of things down there. But again, it couldn't sustain through the dark days of the kind of winter, you know. We had some terrible times there where when the ice was on the ground, we would have maybe 9 or 10 people, even although the first night had attracted 70 people.
The people who came to the Rosyth Folk Song Club, your guests, reads like a who's who in folk music. If I could just pause just for a minute or so and just talk about a couple.
Right.
A couple of stories. The Wattersons appeared there twice, but the first time they came, they were met with a cold response. Can you tell us why, John?
Well, we had booked the Wattersons, and it came to about 10 o'clock at night, and I think we closed at that time at 10:30, because closing time for serving at the bar was 10 o'clock, so we closed at 10:30, and the Wattersons just didn't appear, and never phoned us or anything. So they appeared, I think, at 10 minutes to 10 at night with us all chewing our fingernails, and one of the guys in the door, he had pretty sharp words with them because they'd never phoned us or anything. They gave us some kind of excuse, you know, and I think they did about 20 minutes eventually, but it was, you know, it wasn't very easy. And then the second time, I can't remember what happened, whether they appeared or not. It's so long ago, but the Wattersons were really marvellous.
They went on to bigger things.
Marvellous group.
A few of my heroes played there, Matt McGinn for one, Jimmy Macbeth another, and of course Billy Scott. But Joe Corey, his name stuck out. Fife poet, tell us how you managed to book Joe Corey.
Well, that was quite a strange thing. Like many people in Fife, I had never heard of Joe Corey, although he was a very, very famous man. And my father knew all about Joe Corey, and older people knew about Joe Corey. But I was coming through from Glasgow one afternoon with Matt McGinn, and he said to me, "Do you ever see Joe Corey?" And I said, "Who's Joe Corey?" And he says, "You haven't heard of Joe Corey?" And I said, "No, tell me about him." And of course, Matt had been bellowing songs in my ear all afternoon, and he told me how Joe Corey had been, he came from Slamanan in Stirlingshire, but he was brought up in Cardenden, and he worked down the pits, and then he started writing poetry. And in 1936, he had his first volume of poems published, which was called The Image of God, and in one afternoon they sold 1,000 books on Glasgow Green. And then, of course, Corrie went into writing plays, and he wrote piles of plays. And of course, there were 3-act and 1-act plays, and a great number of them were put on by, like, women's rural institutes and that kind of thing. And his plays were actually put on down in London. He had plays like the Shilling a Wheat Man and these kind of things. And of course, he was a very left-wing poet, and he won competitions. He won a competition for a play. I can't remember which play it was, and he went to Moscow to see it being put on. And I remember that he spent all the money he got because it was paid in rubles and he couldn't take them out of the country. And then he went to Leipzig. His plays were put on down in places, mostly in kind of mining areas, but also down in London. And he eventually finished up in Welwyn Garden City, where he was a cinema projectionist. And you'll remember when they built the pit at Glenrothes, and of course it foundered, but they had built a lot of houses to accommodate the miners, and of course they weren't taken up. So Joe had no problem in getting a house up there. And going back to Matt McGinn, he said, yeah, he's living at 21 Warout Road, Glenrothes. So I went to see Joe Corrie, and they were very welcoming, him and his wife. She had been a singer with the Carol Rosa Opera Company. And I said to Joe, are you still writing? And he went upstairs and he got trunk loads of stuff which had all been rejected by the BBC as being too kitchen sink. They weren't suitable for television, or so they said to Joe. And he was quite a bitter man. And he had marvellous anecdotes, wonderful stories, Joe. And the tragedy is that about, well, this would be the middle 60s when I saw Joe. And he went to Edinburgh, where he died 5 or 6 years later. And after he died, 784 Theatre Company revived all his plays and put them on all round Scotland. And here was people saying, who's this Joe Corrie, who's this Joe Corrie? And I mean, Joe Corrie had been a real biggie in the 30s, but lots of people in Fife didn't know who Joe Corrie was.
Very sad.
Oh, an amazing man. Very erudite, hard, good writer, you know, crawling a book like a snail in the muck, covered in clammy clay, me made after the image of God, jings by his laughable day, you know, real punchy stuff, you know, great. I've got his book up the stair, and then of course there was a book came out, 784 Theatre Company published a book just called Joe Corrie, a lovely book.
Great. And of course the final night of the Versailles Folk Song Club was Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger.
Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger.
Names and folk.
Well, I had met Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger first in 1962. A guy called Maurice Franco from St Andrews, who ran the St Andrews Folk Song Club. Maurice and I went down to London to Hemel Hempstead for a weekend seminar with Ewan MacColl and Peggy Seeger. And there was about 30 of us. There was Maurice, myself, the singer Bob Davenport, Roy Harris, various others. And Ewan was just a monumental figure in Britain and abroad on the folk song line. I remember lying on a beautiful sunny day there and being really discouraged because Peggy Seeger, who was married to Ewan MacColl, she was Pete Seeger's brother, and Peggy Seeger said, hands up those of you who can read music, you see, and out of the whole 30, 2 people put their hands up, and Bob Davenport and I looked at each other, and Peggy said, there is no room in anyone in the folk song revival for those who cannot read music. We just